Welcome back to my video series, AAC Basics. I am Susan Berkowitz, a speech-language pathologist for more than 35 years. Today, we're going to talk about the myths of augmentative communication. I'm going to go over some of the myths you may have heard, and I will tell you the truth. There is a lot of misinformation about augmentative communication. Myth number 1. You may have heard that this child is too low functioning to learn to use AAC. But in fact, there are no cognitive prerequisites for using AAC. Nobody is too low functioning to communicate. Even infants communicate and learn to do so differentially. Myth number 2 is that only someone who is nonverbal should use AAC. In fact, many people with some speech can and do use augmentative communication effectively to communicate. That is why they call it augmentative as well as alternative communication. Many children whose verbal skills are not sufficient to meet all of their communication needs. Many children whose verbal skills are developing very slowly, much more slowly than their understanding of language, and many of those people whose speech is not intelligible enough to all listeners should be using AAC. Myth number 3 is that if no or low-tech systems have not worked, then higher-tech systems won't work either. But in fact, many low-tech systems fail specifically because they do not offer sufficient vocabulary to meet the person's needs. I've often seen children whose low-tech systems have been unused or abandoned. Frequently, this is given as the reason why something more complex hasn't been tried. But to the contrary, why the less robust systems have failed is exactly because they have not offered enough communication strength for the user. Myth number 4 is that there is a sequence from no-tech to low-tech to high-tech through which an AAC user must progress. In fact, the constant progression from one system to another, with the accompanying constantly moving positions of words, actually makes learning more difficult for the AAC user and should be avoided if at all possible. Myth number 5. The child must show ability to discriminate the picture and show that he knows what it means before we put it into his AAC system. In fact, there have been studies done that show that teaching the child to identify the picture symbols does nothing toward making him able to use them. I should know, I completed one of those studies back in the late 1980s, which is an awfully long time for this myth to still be persisting. Putting those pictures into the AAC system, providing adequate aided language stimulation, and using them consistently goes far towards teaching the child how to use them. Myth number 6 is one I hear a lot with children with autism. We need to get the behavior under control first. But in fact, much of what we see as inappropriate behavior in these children has a communicative function. Providing a communication response that serves that function will actually decrease the behaviors. You can't eliminate a behavior without providing an alternative. By providing an effective communication response, the behavior can be effectively reduced. Myth number 7 is that this will be a crutch. For some users, AAC may be a short-term solution to be used while they're acquiring more verbal skills. For some, AAC is a useful strategy for repairing a communication breakdown, rather than as a primary mode of communication. What is true is that for people who see themselves as verbal, whenever or however those verbal skills develop, their verbal skills will always be their primary mode of communication. It is almost always true that people would prefer to be verbal if that is possible. This leads us to myth number 8. If he uses AAC, he won't develop speech. But in fact, it has been shown through research and anecdote that AAC users who have speech potential almost always develop more speech through the use of augmentative communication. Myth number 9. Carrying that thing around makes him look too different. However, not being able to participate in activities or interact with peers or engage with anyone will also make him look different and will keep students from being able to access the curriculum and enjoy all of the social interactions that come with being able to communicate. Myth number 10. Giving someone an AAC system will solve his communication problems. An AAC system is only a tool. As with any tool, how well we use it and produce with it is dependent upon how well we have been taught to use it. Children who are not taught effectively often do not learn to use the system effectively. That does not mean that they do not have the potential to do so, only that we have failed to teach them. So, to recap what we've learned today, nobody is too low anything to use augmentative communication. There is no progression from no to low to high technology systems. Children do not need to demonstrate the ability to recognize the symbol before it is put into their AAC system. Challenging behaviors are frequently serving a communication function. Teach communication skills to reduce those behaviors. Many verbal children do not have enough speech to meet their communication needs to communicate different kinds of messages in different situations. Using AAC will stimulate speech development, not inhibit it. Using AAC can be an excellent repair strategy when the child's verbal skills do not suffice. The AAC system may look strange, but giving him the tools to communicate with others will make him look far less different. Students who are not afforded both a variety of options and effective teaching strategies to develop communication skills have been failed by those of us endeavoring to teach them.